Hello, everyone. Imagine a workplace where the best ideas win, not because of who said them, but because they are the best. A place where transparency isn't just encouraged, it's required, where mistakes are not hidden but analyzed, learned from, and used as a stepping stone to innovation. Walking into a room where everyone knows exactly what everyone else is thinking, where the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is always out in the open. That's what embracing radical transparency is about. It's not just a nice to have cultural value, it's a strategic advantage. In any organization aiming to perform at its highest level, hiding information, masking mistakes, or sugarcoating feedback is like putting sand in the gears of a machine. It slows everything down, it introduces inefficiency, it blocks progress. The fastest path to improvement is through reality, not illusion. Most people are conditioned from a young age to avoid discomfort. They dodge difficult conversations, tell white lies to keep the peace, or keep their heads down to avoid rocking the boat. But in a hyper-forming organization, this kind of behavior is toxic. It creates silos, breeds politics, and prevents real growth. The truth is, you can't fix a problem you don't know exists, and you can't seize an opportunity if people are too afraid to speak up about it. Radical transparency tears down those barriers. What this means in practice is that people must be willing, and even expected, to say what they really think. If someone believes a decision is wrong, they should say it. If a colleague is underperforming, it should be discussed. If leadership is making a mistake, it must be challenged. And when the truth comes out, the response should be curiosity, not defensiveness. Instead of taking it personally, we should ask, is it true? And what can we learn from it? This level of openness isn't just about airing grievances. It's about creating a culture of trust. Ironically, the more honest we are with each other, the stronger our relationships become. Why? Because we know where everyone stands. There's no second guessing, no passive-aggressive back channels, no fear of betrayal. What you see is what you get, and that clarity is incredibly powerful. It accelerates decision-making, improves accountability, and helps align everyone around shared goals. Of course, radical transparency isn't always comfortable. It requires a certain emotional toughness. Not everyone is ready to hear the unvarnished truth about themselves or their work, but the discomfort is worth it, if handled correctly, with respect, empathy, and a shared commitment to excellence. It becomes a crucible for personal and professional growth. People learn faster, teams gel quicker, leaders evolve, and the organization as a whole becomes smarter, more agile, and more resilient. Think of it this way: transparency is like oxygen. Without it, things suffocate. With it, people and ideas breathe freely, but it only works if it's systemic, baked into every layer of the organization. It can't just be for the junior employees while the leadership keeps secrets behind closed doors. It has to go both ways. When leaders admit their mistakes, share their thinking, and invite criticism, they set the tone for everyone else. That humility is not a weakness, it's strength. It shows that the goal is not ego, but truth. And truth is what drives performance. To build this kind of culture, systems are necessary. Feedback loops must be established. Decision-making must be recorded and reviewed. Meetings should be open whenever possible. Information should default to public within the company. People should be encouraged and trained to give and receive feedback in a constructive way. This isn't about brutal honesty for the sake of it. It's about meaningful, actionable insight that helps people and ideas evolve. And yes, some people won't like it. That's okay. Not everyone is cut out for radical transparency. Some will resist, some will complain, and some will leave. But those who remain, Those who buy into the idea that truth and transparency lead to better outcomes will be stronger, more committed, and more capable. They'll be part of something that doesn't just look good on paper, but actually works in reality. The world is changing faster than ever. The only way to keep up is to learn faster than the competition, and the only way to do that is by being brutally honest with ourselves and each other. Radical transparency isn't a slogan. It's a requirement. It's not about being right. It's about getting it right. And that starts with seeing reality as clearly as possible, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. If you care about getting the best results, not just winning arguments or preserving your authority, then you have to design a system where the best ideas win, no matter where they come from. That's what cultivating an idea meritocracy is all about. It's not a theoretical concept. It's a real, practical method for improving decision making and building a resilient organization that outperforms over time. Most companies are structured around hierarchies. Titles and seniority often dictate whose ideas get heard and whose don't. But the truth is, good thinking isn't confined to any level of the org chart. Some of the most valuable insights can come from people who are closest to the problems, those doing the work every day, those who see the gaps, the flaws, the inefficiencies. If you're only listening to voices at the top, you're limiting your potential. You're flying blind to everything your people could tell you if they thought you were actually listening. An idea meritocracy changes that. It's a system where ideas are judged not by who says them, but by the strength of the logic and evidence behind them. Where everyone is expected to think independently, challenge each other, and contribute to a shared understanding of what's true and what's best. That's the core of it. Truth and excellence, not politics. Not flattery, not status games, just the pursuit of the best possible outcomes. Now, you can't just tell people speak up and expect magic to happen. You need mechanisms, you need culture, you need processes that actually reward the right behaviors and penalize the wrong ones. That starts with valuing thoughtful disagreement. People need to know that if they see a problem or have a better idea, not only will they be heard, they're obligated to speak up. Silence is not safe. Silence is failure, and that kind of culture only exists when leaders actively invite dissent and show appreciation for it when it happens. One way to enforce this is through believability, weighted decision making. Not all opinions are equal, and that's okay. But we shouldn't default to hierarchy. We should default to merit. We should ask, who has the best track record of being right in this kind of situation? Who has demonstrated deep understanding through reasoning and results? And then we weigh input accordingly. That's not just fair, it's smart. It raises the quality of decisions by filtering noise and focusing on the most credible insights. It also means that feedback is constant. In an idea meritocracy, people don't wait for annual reviews to say what they think. Feedback is given in real time, directly and respectfully, and it flows in all directions, upward, downward, laterally. This constant feedback loop makes the system self-correcting. Mistakes are caught earlier, blind spots are revealed, decisions improve, and over time, the organization becomes an engine of learning that only works, though, if people can handle it. Not everyone can. Some people are too fragile for open disagreement. Some confuse feedback with personal attacks. But in the right environment, where the goal is clearly to get at what's true and what works, people rise to the challenge. They grow thicker skin, they get better at listening, they sharpen their thinking, and the team becomes stronger, smarter, and more aligned as a result. This isn't easy. It requires a shift in mindset, especially for those who are used to being the boss and having the final word without challenge. But if you care more about being effective than being right, you'll make the shift. You'll start to see disagreement as a gift. You'll see feedback as a sign that someone cares enough to help you improve. And you'll realize that when the best ideas win, everyone wins. Because the outcomes are better, the team gets stronger, and the mission gets closer to being achieved. It's also worth mentioning that an idea meritocracy builds resilience. When people are used to challenging each other and working through conflict constructively, they're better prepared for the unexpected, they adapt faster, they solve harder problems, they're not paralyzed by uncertainty or disagreement because those are things they deal with every day. They've built that muscle. In a world that's constantly changing, that kind of culture is not optional. It's essential. You can't rely on static plans or top-down commands. You need an organization that can think, learn, and adapt in real time. And that only happens when the best thinking rises to the top. Wherever it comes from, so build that, cultivate that, not by accident, but by design. Reward it, protect it, evolve it. Because in the end, it's not about who's in charge. It's about what's true and what works. Let that lead. Let the best ideas win. If you're serious about making the best decisions, you have to create an environment where people feel not just allowed, but expected to disagree. Not emotionally, not out of stubbornness, but thoughtfully. The kind of disagreement that comes from people genuinely searching for truth and better answers, not from ego or the need to be right. Most organizations avoid disagreement because it makes people uncomfortable. But avoiding it comes at a much higher cost. Bad decisions, groupthink, and missed opportunities. Thoughtful disagreement is one of the most valuable forces you can have in any organization. Why? Because none of us sees the full picture. We all have blind spots, biases, and limits to our understanding. The only way to overcome those limits is by engaging with people who see things differently and being willing to listen. The best ideas often come from that friction, but you only get that if people feel safe and motivated to challenge each other in a productive way. This isn't about arguing for the sake of it. It's not about yelling louder or debating like it's a sport. It's about two or more people putting their heads together to solve a problem, even when they start from different viewpoints. It's about attacking the problem, not each other. That distinction is crucial. If people feel like they'll be attacked personally for disagreeing, they'll shut down. But if they see that disagreement is welcomed and even celebrated, they'll engage. They'll bring their best thinking forward, even when it contradicts what others, maybe even the leaders, believe. To build that kind of culture, the first thing you need is psychological safety. People must know that disagreeing won't cost them their job, their reputation, or their relationships. And that comes from the top. If leaders can't handle being challenged, no one else will dare to speak up. But when leaders model curiosity, openness, and humility, it sends a clear message. Disagreement is not a threat, it's a strength. That doesn't mean all disagreements are helpful. There's a difference between thoughtful disagreement and mindless contrarianism. What you want is disagreement that's grounded in logic, evidence, and a sincere desire to find the best path forward. So you set standards, you teach people how to disagree constructively, you encourage them to ask questions, to probe assumptions, to lay out their thinking clearly and honestly, and you reward that behavior when you see it, not just in outcomes, but in the process itself. You also need to separate decision rights from discussion rights. Everyone should have the right to voice their perspective and challenge the thinking, but not everyone gets to make the final call. That clarity prevents chaos. It shows that disagreement is not about disrupting the process, it's part of the process. When people understand that, they don't feel threatened by losing a debate. They know they were heard, they know their input mattered, and they trust that decisions are being made based on the best collective thinking available. Over time, this approach builds a culture of deep respect. Not the superficial kind of respect that avoids conflict, but the real kind that comes from knowing someone will tell you the truth, even when it's hard to hear. It means they care more about getting things right than protecting feelings. And that kind of relationship, built on mutual challenge and shared goals, is far more powerful than politeness or agreement. It also makes the whole system smarter. When people disagree well, they refine each other's thinking. They expose flaws, add nuance, and uncover better solutions. The result isn't just a compromise, it's a synthesis, a higher level understanding that neither side could have reached alone. That's what you're aiming for. Not just winning arguments, but evolving your thinking together. Of course, this doesn't happen automatically. You have to design for it, build it into your hiring, build it into your meetings, build it into your feedback systems. Reward people for speaking up, not just going along. Track the quality of your disagreements, not just your decisions. Because over time, the strength of your organization will be directly tied to the strength of your conversations and the willingness of your people to challenge each other constructively. If everyone agrees, someone's not thinking. That's the trap most organizations fall into. They reward consensus and punish dissent, and then wonder why they keep making the same mistakes. But when you make thoughtful disagreement a core part of your culture, you unlock a different kind of potential. You make better decisions, you move faster, you innovate more, and most importantly, you create an organization where people are not just aligned. They're engaged, thinking, and committed to getting it right. Every day, together, at the end of the day, if you're making decisions based solely on intuition, personal opinion, or tradition, you're flying blind. You may get lucky, but you won't be consistent. You won't be scalable. And most importantly, you won't be learning. That's why implementing data-driven decision making isn't just a good practice. It's a fundamental requirement for anyone who wants to evolve, improve, and outperform over time. Data is reality. It's the closest thing we have to a mirror that reflects what's really going on, not what we think is going on. But most people don't like facing that mirror. They'd rather rely on gut instinct, on experience, on the stories they tell themselves about how things work. But the world doesn't care about your story. It cares about what works, and what works can be seen, tested, and measured. If you're paying attention, the first step is understanding that data isn't optional. If you're not using it, you're running on guesswork. That's fine if you're gambling, but not if you're trying to build something lasting. Every process, every interaction, every decision leaves a trail. You have to collect it, study it, learn from it, and then feed that learning back into your systems so you can continuously improve. Without that feedback loop, you're just hoping. But it's not just about having data. It's about using it wisely. Too many people treat data as a support tool for the conclusion they've already reached. They pick numbers to back up their position rather than letting the data guide them to a better one. That's not data-driven decision making. That's confirmation bias wearing a lab coat. The real value comes when you let the data challenge your assumptions, when you allow it to tell you things you don't want to hear. To do that, you need radical objectivity. You need to get out of your own head and look at the patterns. What's working, what's not, what's repeatable, what's an anomaly. The answers are there, but you have to be willing to look. And you need systems in place that make those answers unavoidable. Dashboards, metrics, decision logs, clear KPI. These tools aren't just for tracking progress. They're for testing hypotheses. They're for constantly questioning whether your beliefs are aligned with reality. That questioning needs to be baked into your culture. When someone proposes an idea, ask them, what does the data say? How do you know that's true? What are you basing that on? And if the answer is just a feeling, dig deeper, because even the best instincts should be tested. The goal isn't to eliminate intuition, it's to refine it by checking it against real world evidence again and again until it gets sharper. And remember, not all data is created equal. You have to be rigorous about where it comes from, how it's collected, how it's analyzed, garbage in, garbage out. The quality of your decisions will only be as good as the quality of your inputs. That means investing in infrastructure, hiring people who understand statistics, who know how to spot correlation vs. causation, who can build models that actually help you see the future instead of just explaining the past. Once you have the systems and the people in place, you create algorithms. Decision rules, playbooks based on what the data tells you tends to work. You don't just trust memory or gut. You encode your learning into repeatable frameworks. And when new data comes in, you test those frameworks. You update them, you evolve them. That's how you build a learning machine. And yes, there are limits. Data can't tell you everything. It doesn't feel, it doesn't intuit, it doesn't imagine. But when used correctly, it gives you a foundation. A base layer of truth that makes everything else more solid. You can still layer on judgment, creativity, vision, but now you're building on rock, not sand. The world is moving faster than ever. Complexity is increasing. The cost of being wrong is going up. In that kind of environment, you can't afford to rely on hunches. You need clarity. You need feedback. You need a way to separate what you wish were true from what is true. That's what data does. So build your systems, question your assumptions, measure relentlessly, and let the data lead, because the truth is, every decision you make, big or small, is either a step forward or a step back. The only way to keep stepping forward is to learn fast, adapt faster, and always listen to what reality is trying to tell you. If you're not constantly improving, you're falling behind. It's that simple. The world doesn't sit still. Competitors don't wait. Markets shift. Technologies evolve. And yesterday's best practices become today's liabilities. The only way to stay ahead, truly ahead, is to treat improvement as a never-ending process. Not a project, not a phase, a mindset, a way of operating, thinking, and being. Every day, every decision, every outcome is an opportunity to learn, adjust, and raise the bar. Improvement doesn't come from intention. It comes from measurement, reflection, and iteration. You do something, you look at what happened, and you ask yourself what you can do better next time. That cycle never ends. Most people don't do that. Most organizations don't do that. They treat success as a finish line. They stop examining what they did because the result was good enough. That kind of complacency is dangerous. The moment you stop questioning how you can do better is the moment you start falling behind. Continuous improvement starts with radical honesty about what's working, what's not, and what needs to change. You need a culture where problems aren't hidden, they're surfaced. Where mistakes aren't punished, they're studied. Where the goal isn't to look good, but to get better. That requires humility. It requires people who are more interested in learning than in defending their past decisions. and it requires systems that make feedback unavoidable. You have to be tracking things, performance, quality, outcomes, not in a vague general way, but with real clarity. You need metrics that matter, and once you have those, you use them to spot patterns. Are you trending up or down? Are certain teams outperforming others? Why? What are they doing differently? This kind of analysis turns improvement from an abstract concept into a practical, daily pursuit. You're not just saying we should improve, you're identifying exactly how and where, but analysis is only part of it. You also have to test, try new things, push boundaries, see what breaks and what holds. You have to be willing to take intelligent risks, because improvement doesn't come from doing the same thing over and over. It comes from experimenting, failing, learning, and iterating. That's the essence of evolution. Not everything will work, but the key is to fail well, to fail in ways that generate insight. That's how you convert short-term losses into long-term gains. At the individual level, this means reflecting constantly. After every project, ask, what went well, what didn't, and what can I do differently next time? Take notes, track your progress, build habits around learning. Improvement isn't something that happens to you. It's something you have to pursue actively, even aggressively. Every mistake is a clue. Every success is a benchmark to exceed. If you approach your work with that mindset, you'll grow faster than most people ever will. And at the organizational level, you need to institutionalize this thinking. Create formal systems for capturing lessons learned. Make postmortems part of your process, not just when things go wrong, but when they go right. Document what worked and why, so others can replicate it. Share those learnings, build a collective intelligence, and make sure leadership is modeling that behavior. If leaders aren't improving, neither is anyone else. It also helps to tie improvement to incentives. What gets measured gets managed, and what gets rewarded gets repeated. Recognize people who evolve. Celebrate those who improve their processes. Don't just reward outcomes, reward learning, reward resilience. Reward those who challenge the status quo and come back with something better. That's how you send a clear message. Getting better is not just appreciated here, it's expected. Now, continuous improvement doesn't mean constant change for the sake of it. You're not throwing everything out every week. It means being deliberate. It means asking every time, is this the best way? And being open to the possibility that the answer is no. It's a balance between discipline and adaptability. You keep what works, but you never stop looking for ways to make it work better. Ultimately, the most successful people and organizations don't have all the answers. They just have better questions. They're obsessed with figuring out how to be more effective, more efficient, more aligned with reality, and they're willing to do the hard work to get there, day after day, iteration after iteration. That's what creates excellence. Not one big leap, but thousands of small steps taken with intention, insight, and relentless drive. So if you want to lead, to grow, to outperform, commit to that process. Make improvement your habit, your obsession, your identity, and never let up, because the gap between where you are and where you could be is always there. The question is, are you closing it?